Running fans, jumping fans, throwing fans, all around athletics fans, welcome to Talking in Ovals. I am Alex Cuesta. My partner in crime over there is Dave Hyatt. What is going on, my brother?
Not much. I got to say, I'm very excited for Chris Tefelsky, one of our previous guests, New Jersey State Coach of the Year, for his phenomenal job with those Westfield Blue Devils. I mean, what an amazing job. It's arguably the greatest team in New Jersey for public school history. So, I mean, congrats to him. They got 19th at Nationals, and congrats to CBA, who was 7th at Nationals. Good job, Sean, over there at CBA. And I think it's really cool this year that we saw the NCAA champ on the men and women not take off time, go right into their first race indoor track, both break the 5K national collegiate record, and now they're going to take their rest. So, I mean, why not just get it early and tackle it? We also saw that with our past guest, Emma Zawatsky, went out and ran the second fastest 3K in New Jersey history. So kind of a cool concept. We didn't really do that when I was in school. You kind of finished cross, took off your time, went back. So, but why not hit a race early and then rest?
If you're still in championship mode and you're still peaking, why not go do that? It is smart. And I believe our friends at Union Catholic, our ladies, they took, what'd you say, 10th, I think you saw, or something like that nationally.
I think it was about 10th, yeah.
About 10th. So they finished pretty high too. You know, we had our guest Peyton Hollis here, so that was exciting to see them have some success. So all around great things occurring. So what we find out is if you are a guest on this show, the following year you will do fantastic. That is what it is. So Talking in Ovals,
pretty much, yeah,
what it is. So before we get into anything else fun, today is Monday, December 11th, 2023. Astute listeners will know that we took a week off. My fault. Daughter got sick. Things happen, but we are back for episode 67 today.
67, huh?
Yeah, we're getting up there. So if you like what you hear, give us a like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5-star, Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Go find us on the socials at Talking in Ovals. Before I talk about last week's show real quick, I just have to say I am pumped that the announcement today from my alma mater, Marist College, we are finally getting a track and field complex. I am overly excited. This is long overdue. We just had on our new assistant coach from Marist, Billy Poole Harris, on the show. Amazing energy. We've had on Coach Chuck Williams, a ladies coach over there, my former head coach, Pete Colizzo, the director there, and the sprints coach, Terry Horton, four of the best coaches in the country. Finally getting a track and field facility. So I am overly excited. If you want to find out how to donate, please, we need donations there. Trying to get the 3.5 mil. They have $1 million right now towards it. Contact me. Get donations there. We need it. This team deserves a track.
We'll put a link on Twitter too.
Yes, we'll put a link. They're getting one, but just want to get them the funding and hopefully get more so we can get a better one. But 2 weeks ago, we had an amazing show. We had Dave Waddle on, 1972 Olympic gold medalist, was one of the greatest 800 meters races you will ever see. Go check it out. He's one of the most humble but still cerebral sounding guys. It was weird, right, Dave? Because as humble as he is, I feel like if you line them up on the track, he still thinks he can go win. Like he has that about him. So
you have to. No,
that's a great show.
Meeting him in person was absolutely amazing. It was, and he was just the same way in person, super, super humble, just very, just down to earth. Like he would talk to just great guy. What a story. I mean, it was an absolute pleasure having him on last week.
It was amazing. And, just hearing legends like that is great. But this week, we have an awesome guest on because what she does is super important, especially right now for all athletes. She's an individual that helps them out with their psych. She is Meg Waldron. She has her master's in sports psychology, works primarily with high school and collegiate distance runners. When she was in high school, she was an All-American in track and field for Bernard High School over in Jersey, splitting 2:08 at the Penn Relays and the fastest high school girl to date in the Penn while anchoring a 4x8 team. And she recently contributed to Molly Huddle and Sarah Slattery's book, which we had Sarah on many moons ago, How She Did It. And in 22 received the Title IX recognition for her work for empowering female runners. And just so everyone gets it right, she is a sports psychologist, not a psychiatrist. What's going on, Meg?
Hi. Thank you for having me on, you guys. And just so you know, I'm a mental performance coach.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not a sports psychologist, mental performance. I got that one wrong at the end.
Yeah, that's okay. But everything else is good and accurate. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited. So we're going to do a little bit of an inverse here because we're passionate about what Meg does. Meg is passionate about what she does. And I'm excited to hear about it. So I want to jump in right away because I think that we all know one of the major focuses right now, especially with distance runners, because distance runners, we've always been a little bit nuts, right? To be able to sit there and want to run that long, there's something a little bit ticking there. So you are somebody that helps young athletes when they get to these mental walls. So first off, what made you want to go into the field of sports psychology and be a mental performance coach?
I feel like I was called to it, and I worked my way there throughout my life by being first a runner and then a running coach. And then for about 14 years, I was a school teacher. And the opportunity came on my radar that Temple University had a sports psychology program. And I live in Philadelphia. And so I just went there one day to check out the classes. And before you know it, I enrolled. I really just want to initially, the idea was to provide the support that wasn't there when I was coming up.
Yeah. So that's something that is definitely important. Now, talk about some of the supports that you're providing right now that you necessarily didn't have as a runner.
The idea of being able to get out of the overwhelm of sport, which can cause anxiety, being able to improve focus by looking at what you can control, letting go of what you can't, some mindfulness tools to help bring down that anxiety. And also, I think that teens can be hard on themselves. They compare themselves to others, and they can be talk negatively in their heads about themselves and believe that. And so I help them understand why the brain's doing that and how to have a little bit more agency over how you think about yourself and how you treat yourself.
So I think that's something incredible because I think what you're doing goes well beyond just what they're doing on the track, right? Because as a teenager, even as a young adult, right, in college, going through puberty or also going into somewhere scary, because once you get away from high school into college, you might have been the best runner at your high school, but now you're entering into this arena, whether it's D3, D2, D1, whatever it is, NAIA. All of these individuals are now there to be the best. They were the best where they came from. So you can have that little bit of inferiority about you. And you don't have a good workout, it creeps in a little more. Now you don't have a great race, it creeps in. So what you're doing is not only providing a skill to be a good athlete, you're providing a skill in life because, I mean, we've all gone through our own trials and tribulations. And when it really gets tough, the easiest thing to do and the most common thing to do is
give up.
Well, I can't do this. This is too heavy. This is too much. I'm not good enough. And I love what you're providing. So have you seen what you do for the athletes on the track pay dividends in other parts of their lives? And have people come back to you, parents and other athletes, telling you like, hey, not only is this helping me on the track, but this is helping me through X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, that's funny that you asked that because I was working with a swimmer and his homework was to work on a breathing technique I taught him to manage anxiety before his swim meets. And so then the next week I checked on him and I said, were you able to use the breathing technique? He goes, yeah, but not for what you might think. And I said, what was it? He said, I had to do a recruiting visit down south and I had to get on a plane for the first time. And he said, so I did the breathing to help manage my anxiety around flying. And I've had other athletes say that they've used that if they had to take an exam or a test, or often also encourage a teammate who's struggling. They'll use some of those techniques and share them.
That's awesome.
I absolutely love how this has become so mainstream and complex. Because I remember when I was in high school back in the 90s, there really wasn't anybody that you could go to talk to. Like my coach was wonderful, but he was my coach. He wasn't anybody who I would talk to in kind of that capacity. And it's kind of hard as a coach, especially at the high school level when you have so many kids on your team. So it's wonderful that you're out there and that people like you are out there. And I love how so many pro athletes now are making it commonplace that it's okay to have mental issues, whether it's Kevin Love or DeMar DeRozan, or so many athletes now are seeking help, talking to people, and if they're doing it at the pro level, it's great to see it all just trickle down. And now someone like yourself can really help these athletes when they're probably at their most immature or stage where they're kind of looking for who they are as a person.
Yeah, their brains are definitely still developing and have a few more years to go in high school. I often tell them, because some kids aren't used to like talking about this part of their experience being an athlete with somebody, maybe a little bit with their coach. So what I say is, I'm just like another coach. It's different from if you were having a bad day at school and maybe there was some drama in your friend group. So you went and you sat with the school counselor. It's different than that. It's going to be more like you're checking in with your coach, except I'm your brain coach. And teenagers love this too. I say it's like going from the passenger seat of the car to the driver's seat of the car. And then they start to see that what I'm doing is very much like them getting coached. And it feels very normal to them.
Do you feel like your experience in the past as a coach helps you create that environment, that you're not coming at it from just somebody who only went through school and is coming at this from a clinical side? Because I feel like that can almost be invaluable. Like, you've dealt with adolescent athletes before, so you understand how to talk to them, how to deal with them, instead of just coming at them and being like, sit down, let's talk about X, Y, and Z. Like, I feel like in that way, it feels more intimidating. And whether or not, like, Dave said, it's more mainstream now to be able to be more, vulnerable, but kids will still always attach a stigma to things. I think that's just kind of a natural reaction. So when you have someone like yourself that is maybe making it, like you said, more of a sit down talk with a coach, not a sit down session with a person that's helping me with my mental health right now. Like, I feel like disarming that, like taking some of those walls down, helps with these kids.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that has helped is social media. The private is public now.
Yep.
When I first started this work 7 or 8 years ago, when I finished grad school, athletes didn't want other people to know they were working with me. And now I get shout outs on Instagram. I'll get a picture with them and they'll say, yeah, you can put it up on Instagram. You can say you work with me, whatever. And so now it's just become a part of the formula for helping young kids, is just having somebody to talk to. It's become very normalized.
I love that. Now, how much of an effect did COVID play on your role, and overall, do you think, in the health of our younger athletes at that time?
Well, COVID certainly normalized kids talking to somebody on Google Meet, and that's how I do all my sessions. So now that's just very normal. When I started, I had an office, and parents would have to drive kids to me and that kind of thing. So COVID really helped with that. The other thing is that kids, the anxiety went way up, because a lot of people who come to sports come to it because it helps them regulate their emotions. They don't realize that they're doing it, but like wrestlers, those are people that after they've had deep pressure and they've been throwing each other around, they're like really calm, And so similarly for runners, this feeling that they just got all that kind of the ants in their pants out. They went out for a run. Now they feel relaxed. So to not have that, they didn't have a way to regulate. And so more kids started reaching out to me. Plus the use of social media went up. And I think in general, that has to be managed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I also think too, darn it, I lost my train of thought. Never mind, Alex.
Okay. So do you also think, because I also found that, from coaching and things like that, that kids that don't necessarily have a lot of structure in their lives, when they get involved with sports, if they do, it really helps them thrive because, seeing all this, kids need structure in their lives. People in general need structure in their lives, but especially kids do. So do you find that, that structure that was taken away from the kids during COVID is something that they're seeking? And, that is that something that they complain to you about, that they didn't have that routine and that structure in their lives during that time?
Yeah, because they're used to being led and guided and coached, and it's hard for them to be able to do that for themselves. So certainly during COVID, me helping them set small goals, them being able to check in with me next week. I became like an accountability partner for a lot of kids, just for them to be able to keep training in some kind of way.
I also think too, I remember what I was going to say. There's a lot of kids and athletes who joined sports just to be around and socialize. That whole aspect of that was all taken away. So how much of that do you think played a part? Like they're just home and they might go for the actual run or work out, but you lose all that sense of team and socialization and things like that.
Yeah, that was really hard. Kids don't have the same resources that adults do. And so that was for a lot of kids, that was the first really, really hard thing they'd ever been through. And at least if it was a time of struggle like 9/11, we could all kind of come together. Yeah. At COVID, we all had to just stay home and sit on the couch, So,
Meg, do you hear any stories now from, Dave said a lot of pro athletes and even some the higher level collegiate athletes share now when they have some mental health things and like that. Do you ever hear any stories from like some of the all-time greats when they start to share some of their issues and you're just kind of like, oh, I wish I was around then. Like, I wish like I know how to help that. Like I could have helped you because we had Noelle Whitehall Johnson on, and she talked about her struggle with an eating disorder when she was running in college. And I feel like that's something that somebody like you could help an individual like that in order to, see the bubblings up of things like that with the self-esteem and things. And if they come to you, you can help alleviate some of those things. Have you found that you've had, especially female athletes, because, Noelle mentioned that pressure is a lot on female athletes in terms of like their body and how they want it to be. Have you found that you've been able to nip things like that in the bud, or is that still something where they're keeping the genie in the bottle? They're trying to hide it.
I mean, I would hope so. I'm not a specialist in eating disorders.
Yeah.
That would be somebody trained to do that. Mm-hmm. But you're right. The whole idea of body image, expectation, external validation. One of the things I talk to kids about, and I went through this myself, when I started in high school running, I started as a youth runner, but when I got to high school, I was only 5'1" and less than 100 pounds. I was this little peanut, and I had some really fast long distance times. And I remember by my sophomore year, I'd run that 9:33, 3,000 that hung around for like 30 years or something till Charlotte Bednar got that. So then by my senior year, I ran that 2:08 at Penn Relays, and I was 5'6.5". And I'd grown significantly, and I was getting faster. I was faster at shorter distances, but nobody told me that in that change in body type, that I would be better as a mid-distance runner and make potentially less good as a long-distance runner. Of course, there's always very tall, strapping women cross-country runners. There's histories of that too. But I was never a strong cross-country runner. So my identity was as this person who could do something fast from 800 to, 10K. By the time I got to college, I grew another 1.5 inches. I went up to 5'8". And I couldn't really run very well anymore. And I was really injury prone. But my identity was so wrapped up in getting my self-esteem from running well that if I was only a good person, if I ran well, who was I if I ran poorly? Was I a bad person? And see, that's what happens is it gets all mixed up in the identity. I'm only good and valuable on this earth if I'm, like these girls you're talking about with eating disorder. And we saw a lot of that in college. It was a big part of, I was really, all that post, within the 10 years after Title IX, when all these girls hit the colleges. And so there was a lot of that when I was in college. And a lot of it is that. So one of the things I work on is like, who are you besides a runner? What are your strengths? What are your gifts?
And I think that's great too, because I think we see it a lot of times. And a guy I think of when you talk about how like your worth is attached to your sport is someone like Kyrie Irving, who famously flat out says, I'm a lot more than a basketball player. I play basketball. This is my job, but this is not all who I am. And he gets criticized a ton for that. And we get a lot of pro athletes that get that criticism of if they're not sleeping and breathing their job, then we're assuming that they're bad at what they're doing. They're not working hard enough. And I think it's valuable to what you're saying, where when you're on the track, in the pool, on the field, yes, that is who you are. But when you're off of that, you need to be able to be something else. You need to, it's okay to love your sport, love what you do, but you got to have more hobbies. You have to have something else. Like, you can't just be Meg the runner or, Dave the runner. Like, that can't just be your identity. And I think that's a valuable thing to do, especially for kids who their only goal is to seek out what group they're going to fit into. So I really think what you do is amazing. So when you first broke into this field 7 years ago, what was your most pressing challenge that you found then that you had to go at in terms of trying to get clients to come to you and things like that?
Well, my professors all said, you'll never make a living doing this. And at the time, the primary hirer, maybe still, of people with a master's in sports psychology was the military. And I didn't want to work for the military. And so I reached out to Coach Gaggs, who was coaching New York, New Jersey Track Club. Yep. And I said, can I work with some of your athletes? So I started there and it was a long slog to get here, but I just committed to the journey of really just spreading the word that this was really valuable work and it really helpful and could unlock a lot of potential for athletes.
Well, I know, every coach or person who's associated with the sport in this state, when I mentioned that you were coming on the show, it was extremely high praise for Absolutely. What you do, and people are very, very, very excited because we like to kind of tell the story of all aspects of the sport. Like we had on Robert Keller, who runs,
mile split
and things like that. So like it's just nice to have all these perspectives. So it just know that people are definitely very fond of the work that you are doing and the pathway that you are creating for all these kids.
Thank you. When I was in graduate school, is when Madison Holleran needed a suicide here in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. She was a really good 800-meter runner.
UPenn, right?
Yeah. What was that?
You went to UPenn for college.
Yeah, she went to UPenn, and in New Jersey, she was at Northern Highlands.
Yes. Yeah.
And she. So it's a lot of the stuff that I was talking about around identity, perception, fulfilling the expectations of others. If I do that, I'm good. If I don't, I'm bad. And I saw my share of that when I was in college. There were attempted suicides by girls in the program. And so when I went to graduate school and then that happened with Madison, I vowed to kind of keep that in my back pocket. Now, I don't, on any given day, I'm certainly not dealing with anybody in that kind of a situation, but I like to think that I'm planting the seeds for them to kind of understand themselves better and have a map for the road ahead and how to navigate it to prevent those worst case scenarios.
So is number one, Dave, we need to get Coach Gags on because I think every guest from New Jersey mentioned we absolutely have to get him on. But
Gags is great.
Oh man, I've heard only high praise about him.
Frank Gagliano is an incredible man. Yeah,
we need him on. But my second thing to you, Coach, is that do you find the challenge of keeping these athletes away from social media, away from, looking up the times of their rivals and being obsessed with those types of things? Do you find that's a big challenge today that wasn't necessarily a challenge 7 years ago with like the rise of how much TikTok has really taken over a lot of things? And Strava is an obsession for every single distance runner at the high school level. Have you found those as big challenges of trying to get them to like lock those parts away? Or do you find a way to incorporate them in a healthy manner into their lives?
Well, I mean, unless they're lying to me, it hasn't been too hard.
Okay.
So what I do is I say, like a lot of the athletes now know, no social media on their phone once they enter championship season. And sometimes because one of the things we do is we set just goals that last a week. And that helps build confidence and bring small wins and that kind of thing. So I'll say the goal is, get off of Strava, get off of Mile Split, Let's Run, Instagram, TikTok. Just try it for the next week.
Please get off of Let's Run. Do not go on those Let's Run boards. I love Let's Run. We love you, Jonathan Galt. You're a friend of the show, but those boards they've been awful since the inception. They're the meanest people.
I just imagine these 20-year-old males in dark rooms
who haven't ran since like they were 15. Oh my God. Start reaching out on Let's Run. Go start getting more clients.
So do you notice that there are different topics for the boys than there are for the girls, or is it kind of the same for everyone?
Yeah, it's funny. If I give a workshop to a team and I put statements up on paper around the room, the one that says be kinder to myself, and I tell all the kids, go find the statement that is like the intention that a goal you want for yourself. All the girls are over at that one. Be kind to myself. I find that comes up a lot with females is negative self-talk, really hard on themselves. The one for guys can be more often around focus and chunking things down, breaking it down so that they can focus better. But that being said, everybody I've seen experience anxiety and negative self-talk and struggling with focus, all gender.
Yeah. So I honestly, again, I said it before, I'll say it again. I think what you're doing is amazing. I think what you provide is a service that should have been done a long time ago, especially for, not just young athletes, but young people. So I think it's awesome what you're doing. Where can people reach out to you? How do they get in contact with you? If you're a parent or you're a coach or you're an athlete yourself listening and you're thinking, I might need this. I get psyched out way too easy before a race. I have great workouts every week, but every race I get a block. Like I might need some help. How can people find you?
MegWaldron.com is my website. I'm on Instagram, Coach Meg Performance. I'm on Twitter at Mindset Coach Meg.
I think so too. We'll check that.
Or Smoke Signals.
Smoke Signals. That's the best way. Still the old school way. And it's at Meg Waldron MS, but Mindset Coach Meg. You can go find it. Yeah. And Waldron is spelled Waldron, just so people know. So we're gonna, reverse this. We're gonna do the Tarantino now, and I'm gonna go back to what we normally would do. And I just want to talk about you. I want to talk about Coach Meg Waldron, the person. And I want to talk about your running journey to start off. When did you get the spark to become a runner? When did you have that aha moment? Because we all, as we're young, we do a whole bunch of different things. And most of the time, nobody wants to be a runner. But when did you get the spark of, I really like this. I want to do this for a long time?
uh, basic, in the neighborhoods growing up, running races in the streets, playing tag games, never getting caught. Every year, I went to Catholic school and they'd have field day, and I'd run in the sprints. And so I was fast. I'm from one of 9 kids.
Oh,
I'm from a very big family. So being fast, it was probably a survival skill in my family. I get caught and, jumped on or whatever.
Go get to the food first.
Yeah, get to the food. We're in a big family fighting after all the resources. But it was a big part of growing up. It was the running boom in the United States. And also, I grew up in a running town. Like, everybody ran.
Mm-hmm. Fun.
I think it was Ed Grant.
That's a legendary name.
Yeah, the famous sports writer said, "You were born in the right place at the right time with the right people."
That's awesome. And that, it's always nice. Like, you're one of the rare people that quite literally started off wanting to be a runner and was a runner, because we've had so many stories of the greats. I was like, I was not a runner.
Soccer player, swimmer,
soccer player, swimmer, football player, anything else but a runner. And I feel like, and I say to people, and I find it funny, like, most people won't try track or cross country because they're afraid that they'll be good at it and they don't want to give up the sport that they want to play. So it's like, when you get that realization, it's like, damn it, I'm really good at this. I just won the conference. Like, this sucks. Now I have to stick with this forever. But it's fun and refreshing to hear somebody that enjoyed running from the jump and wanted to do it, obviously had a ton of success. So I want you to talk about some of your best memories. What are some of your favorite memories of when you first started running, middle school, high school, college? What were some of your favorite memories from doing all those?
I remember finding out about this program called Run for Fun, offered by the recreation department in Bernardsville, my hometown. And so I went to it, and Ed Mather, the wonderful man who really ignited running in Bernardsville, and he would tell everybody and get everyone excited. They called him Crazy Eddie. He would get everyone all excited, and he'd say, "You know what you do?" He said, and he would jump up on a table and he'd say, "They're going to call you to the starting line. And then you know what you're going to do right in front of everybody?" And he had his shorts on, but his sweatpants over. Nobody knew that. And he would pull his sweatpants down and everyone would go, "Ah!" Only to see that his shorts were on. And he'd say, "They're going to tell you to strip down." And everyone would go, "Whoa!" And they'd go all crazy, and they'd hand him their $5 to sign up for Run for Fun.
That's great. That's awesome. So go into more. If you have more stories like that, that's amazing. So as you got older, what are some of your other fond memories about competing and things like that?
So I remember running in the Bernardsville Invitational. They had a youth, I guess a youth category or something. It was a high school meet primarily. And I won the mile, and I got a stopwatch.
Ooh.
And, like being that kid that shows up in the neighborhood with something new.
Yeah, the shiny new toy.
Shiny new toy. Nobody else has anything else new. And I've got a stopwatch. So then all the kids, we drew lines on the street. We ran up this hill. We ran down the hill. Tie me down the driveway. Tie me up the Waldron's hill. Time me how fast. And having that stopwatch, I was like, it was just a really, really amazing. I don't know. It seemed small, but having that stopwatch felt big. It was like a sled, like a shiny red sled or something.
So you had the luxury of running for a young Mark Wetmore. What was that like? And Colorado now, like he's had so much success. You got him back in high school. So what was that whole experience like?
Well, Mark is only about 11 years older than me, and he grew up in Bernardsville.
Okay.
So he's from my hometown, and he also went to Bernards High. And after college, he came back to live in Bernardsville and got involved with the recreation program. But he would coach the middle schoolers, and he was a little bit legendary because he was cool. And he just had this coolness about him. And so I was one of the little kids. So we were all like, ooh, like, he's too cool. Like, stay away from him. And then in around 6th grade, he said to some of the good kids, he said, if you guys want to run all year round, I'll even coach you in the winter. And so most of the kids went to the public school, so they were there already where he was meeting us. But myself and another kid were at Catholic school. So we would have to get changed in the Catholic school and then walk over, I don't know, maybe half a mile or so to Bernard's High, quarter mile. And the boy, because it wasn't cool to be walking with a girl, he would either walk ahead of me, or if I left before him, he would walk slow enough so he was far behind me. And we would do that every day and run. And that was one of my early memories of running full time for Mark was, I think, in 6th or 7th grade.
That's great.
That's awesome. And, obviously Mark is a legend. Coach Wetmore is amazing. Now, you have a funny story about asking your junior prom date.
I was just going to ask this one. Yeah.
Tell us about that, because your junior prom date, John Carlotti.
I mean, stud.
Absolute monster, 405 miler. But you have an interesting story of so how did that manifest? What made you want to do that way? Like, tell us about it, because it happens to be a legendary spot that you asked him.
Yeah. So I was kind of shy and a late bloomer. And I really had a crush on John, and the junior prom was coming up. And so Mark had brought us down to Homedale to practice on the course. And we were running down the hill into the bowl, and I was running with the girls, and I went ahead to catch up with the boys. And I ran up alongside him and I said, John, do you want to go to the junior prom with me? And he goes, sure. It was, yeah, I'll go to the junior prom with you. And I remember running back to the girls, and I was like jumping up and down and going, wee, wee, yeah. He said yes.
I'm just trying to think if there's any faster high school mile PR junior prom dates that, like, in the history of junior proms.
I don't know if that record's been broken.
I mean, 405 and 447. I mean, 405 and 447. That's
that might be the only record I have left in New Jersey.
We have to start asking all of our guests what they ran their senior year and what their junior prom date ran their senior year. We'll keep a tally. I don't know if anyone's ever watched Top Gear. I might be a car nerd, but they used to keep the times of everyone that they did on the racetrack. We'll do that for junior prom dates.
We've already had on the fastest mile
married milers
ever.
Yes,
married with Robbie and Josette.
Yeah.
What about I think Marco Langen might have gone to a dance with Kate D'Souza.
That would be a very good one.
That would be that would be competitive. I think that needs to be our non sequitur at the end of every single show. We need to ask, okay, how fast was your junior prom date in the mile? Which most of the runners would probably have a decent answer, like, he ended up running 4:15, or she was like a 4:50 miler. Like, we'd probably get some pretty fast answers.
Well, the people on the team are the people you hang out with most, so it makes sense.
Absolutely.
And also, so we went to the parties after the prom, but we left them. We didn't stay long because we had a 20-mile training run the next day. And the kids were like, you're leaving? It's only like 10 o'clock at night or 10:30 at night. And we're like, we're running a 20-miler tomorrow. Like, we were really proud of that. And we were really, see you later, alligator. We're going to go get rest.
You don't see many 20-milers nowadays in high school.
No. And fortunately,
I know.
And Chris Curtin has said this too, who was a really good runner out in Long Island. She said we were held to a male yardstick. And so if the boys ran 15 miles, I ran 15 miles. So Mark was corresponding with the famous, the legendary New Zealand running coach, Arthur Lydiard, because he was trying to kind of unlock the secrets of distance running and try to find as much information as he could. So he had written to Arthur Lydiard and said, your chapter on coaching young kids is really kind of short. And so Lydiard said, well, why don't you write it? Why don't you do, you can expand on that. So Mark decided he was going to try to coach us like Arthur Lydiard.
That's tough.
That's
That is tough. And, and I think 20 milers, you see a lot, like there's a handful of college athletes that still do 20 milers. Like it is it's a difficult distance to run if your goal is to run a fast mile or a fast 2 mile or a fast 5K. That is, I think in this time we kind of know that might be a little overkill depending on the athlete. Some athletes absolutely thrive on that stuff, but I don't think that's a one size fits all, but that's not any athlete.
And you have to remember, he was like 25 years old then, right. The ponytail
and probably still really fit. So you also had a really good career coaching as well. Talk about some of the great athletes that you've coached, your experience as a coach, because I mean, you're coming full circle now. You're a fantastic athlete. You're a good coach. You're helping everyone all together. So talk about your time as a coach.
Well, I started out coaching at Bernard's High School with Ed Mather. And that was around the time, I'm not going to take a ton of credit for that because I was early 20s. And they were coming up on 100 dual meet wins.
Nice.
Like unbroken 100 consecutive dual meet wins. But they made it to 99. So I'm not going to take credit for any of that. But I then got a job at Pingree, the Pingree School. And I was introduced by the coach, great guy, Vic Nazario, who only recently retired. But he brought me into a meeting with anybody interested in the boys team. And he really did a great job and introduced me, and you need to show this runner respect. She's faster than all of you put together. And all that. And afterwards, these two little blonde-haired boys come up to me and they say, Coach Meg, we want to be good. And that was Chris and Tim Lear.
Wow.
They looked like two golden retriever puppies. And I started coaching them, and I would coach them on weekends and off season. And that boys team, we had quite a few All-Americans, because I think my memory is, I'm not like a stat person, but I think they did a really good DMR. I should know this. Maybe you guys do. And then Chris ran
he was like a 409 miler, right? In high school?
Yeah. So Chris he was the fastest New Jersey boy miler of the 1990s. His brother wasn't too bad as a 2-miler either.
That's incredible.
That's fantastic. And,
so, I mean, and for those who don't know, Chris Lear went on to write one of my favorite books, Running with the Buffaloes.
Yes.
So like how proud were you in that moment? Did you see him, as being an author type, or was he just like kind of an athlete in your eyes?
No, well, by then he'd already graduated from Princeton. He's very bright, very creative thinker. You put together, that creativity and that ambition, like his belief, his strong belief in doing this, writing this book. And so he reached out to Mark, and Mark Wetmore doesn't normally give people that kind of access.
Well, we know. We had on Steve Slattery. He talked all about it.
Yeah. So he's still cool, right?
Yeah.
And he knew that I had coached Chris, so he gave Chris that access to write about the Colorado team.
And I love this little, like, all the connections that we're making here, because, you've worked with Sarah Slattery, who we had on. We had on Steve Slattery, Chris Lear, then all this connections that we've had. We have to have Chris on now because we have to finish this connection.
Yeah, you have to finish the legacy.
Listen, I mean, he also wrote Sub 4, a wonderful book about Alan Webb's only year at Michigan. So like he's been able to have access to some pretty remarkable programs, and then give us the insight of what is going on. It's just fantastic.
Well, I hold all the phone numbers, so just let me know.
I love that. Thank you so much. We love having resources and making friends. So from your perspective as a coach, and now since you're still around the sport and you see what coaches go through, how have you seen all the changes that have gone on with new shoes, new equipment, new technology, and kind of assess what do you think is better for the athletes and coaches, and what do you now think is worse for the athletes and coaches since, your time as coaching till now?
One thing that's definitely better is training's gotten more specific. And I see that in, female runners not having to run as much as the male runners are running. Running pre-puberty can be very wearing on the body. So athletes, hopefully, I think for the most part, when they're that young, aren't training as much as they are in high school.
Yeah.
Of the core strength training, the plyometric drills, the glute activation, all of that is really so valuable, and I really could have benefited from that. One of the things that's changing, I see that could be a detriment to families that don't have the economic resources, is more kids getting private coaches.
Yeah.
And I'm that everything is raising the bar. There's so many SAT prep companies now. I mean, when I was in high school, you got like a little card and you went to a cafeteria somewhere and you took the SATs and you didn't think anything before it or anything after it. So that's sort of raising the bar. And so I'm sensitive to that because I grew up in this big family. We didn't have a lot. And so in my working with kids and families, doing sports psychology, I do it like a sliding scale, if that's helpful, so that an athlete can have that service. So that would be another one, is this sort of all these people, these private coaches and all the money coming in, these boots that kids put on that inflate, that help with circulation and getting massages. And so there's a lot of that. There's a lot
even the cost of the actual shoes now. There's so much money.
That's it. It wasn't even mentioning the shoes, but the shoes for sure are a big advantage. No doubt, no question. And then, so those are things that have changed, and the futurism. So I think back in the day, my experience is that even though I was thinking about future races, I was still living day by day.
Yes.
And you had to wait a week for I had to wait, I might wait a week to see results of something in the current news, or a weekend. But, there wasn't all that information coming at me. And kids are sponges. I think they absorb what's going on, whether or not they're following it. They're hearing about it. And there's a lot of negative stuff happening in the world. And
you know what? You mentioned a great point about the track part. There were so many races that I ran. I didn't know who I was racing. Now they have start lists prior to, so like exactly who's in your heat.
Yeah.
And so there's all this pressure now where I feel like we just got on a line like, oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna race this guy. Whereas now, everyone's time, what they've run, probably all their workouts from Strava too. So it's just, you're right. There's a lot more information now, and everything has to be dealt with.
And you kind of had an educated guess going into races, right? Like you would know if I'm in the county, okay, I know in my division, X, Y, and Z maybe got in there. I raced against them in a field dual meets, and then you would be surprised at who you see and who you didn't. But yeah, you're right. Like there's a lot more going on here. And, and I think one thing you touched on, Meg, is that the importance of school coaches and caring and really trying to work with your athletes. And we've had on some of the best New Jersey has to offer on this show. And I will say that bar none, that the coaches that we've had, public school and private with Coach McCaffrey, college coaches, they give it their all and they care about their athletes. And you'll keep more athletes home at your school, not going to private coaches, if they believe that your program and you have their best interests in mind. Now, sometimes you get parents that want their athletes to go other places, and you can only do so much there. But I mean, we've had the best of the best. And I think that if you're a high school coach, and it could be, or a college coach, it could be overwhelming. you might not be getting some of the results you want. And I feel like, Meg might be someone you want to reach out to personally, because I'd imagine she'd be able to help you as well as a coach if you're going crazy. Like, I can't connect with these athletes, coach. What can I do? Meg, have you had coaches, actually, it's a question.
I was just going to ask you that.
Reach out to you and be like, what am I doing? Or with the specific athlete, like, I know you've worked with this athlete. How can I work better with you? Like, have you had coaches reach out to you for any sorts of help?
Yeah. Some coaches say, I just don't know. What are the things you say to them? So one of the things I'll say is, if the athlete asks you a question, you ask them that question back. Like, if the athlete says, I'm nervous about the race today, coach, what should I do? As the coach, you say, well, what do you think you should do? First of all, it's good because kids need to develop that ability.
Critical thinking skill, yeah.
Critical thinking skills. And then the other is, it gives the coach time to think about what we're going to say.
That's a good skill.
So that's wonderful. And I had coaches reach out to me during the pandemic to help also with just finding support for them as well in that situation.
Now, have you had any coaches who actually want to have like an actual session with you for themselves, or is it strictly just the athletes?
Yeah, I've worked with I've worked with high school and college coaches.
I love that.
And also,
can you work with some parents that have anxieties about their athletes? Like, you work with that at all?
I've worked with parents, because parents will say, how much should I be involved? So I always say, don't process the competition on the ride home. No post-game analysis. Let them choose. Let the kids have agency and say if they want to talk about it or not.
Which I can imagine is so hard, especially if you're a parent that really tries, like, and it is tough, win or loss. It is tough to process exactly what goes on post-race, post-competition. And, and I think that's valuable to get out here too, that, Meg's not only here for the athletes. Like, if you're a coach, if you're a parent, you need a strategy on how to work or deal with an athlete. Meg is there for you as well. So, don't feel shy. She's obviously, if you've heard on this show, she's freaking awesome and really passionate about her job. And, I think it's just like so cool what you do, just overall. And your wealth of knowledge and the strategies are amazing. So, anything else with coaching that you want to bring up that you think maybe would help a current coach now? What type of anxieties did you go through as a coach that if you had someone like yourself to talk to, you would have given that advice to Coach Meg from, Mental Performance Coach Meg?
I mean, fortunately, nowadays there's more professional development for coaches. And there's also things like background checks and clearances that weren't necessarily around when I was coming up. So I would say, one of the most damaging things that a coach could do is have an athlete feel ashamed. And that also to make sure that they keep their, it sounds cliche, but they kind of keep their ego in check. So they're not just trying to get the athletes to win to make the program look good. And I've seen that before. And just, a lot of coaches are school teachers.
Yeah.
And I was a school teacher for about 14 years. And I think that probably helps me in my work as much as having a running background, is just responsible communication.
So quickly, what you're talking about, a lot of positivity, right, with the athletes and things like that. Where would you draw the line on accountability versus making them feel ashamed, right? Because we've all had those moments where we see an athlete and you see them give up, right? You know it, you're watching them, you know what they're capable of. How would you have a coach approach that? Because I feel like with young people and athletes especially, you have to hold them accountable at times. So their performances, if they gave it their all, they had a bad race, you can see that, right? But there's also times where you can see like that third phase of every race, the hardest, especially as a distance runner, you see them give up. How do you approach that without making them feel ashamed, holding them accountable, because that's a fine line to walk on, right? And obviously it's knowing the individual and how you can speak to them. But what would be some strategies? Because I feel like as a coach, it's your job to hold them accountable, but you also don't want to discourage them from continuing to work hard. So what would be your advice in that sense?
Social learning is really important for teens versus sometimes just taking them off and correcting them. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I recommend coaches do, and I didn't invent this, and a lot of coaches already do this, is teaching them what I call the 3 post-performance questions. So the athletes can ask themselves, what did go well? What did I learn? What do I want to change for next time? And the what do I want to change for next time is usually where did I screw up? But the way you phrase it, there's more. And I don't use the word positivity, but I use the word an open opportunity for learning. I'll say open opportunity for learning, or an open mindset, or a neutral way of thinking, rather than thinking, well, if you're positive, that helps you from being negative, because it just doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, I got to say, I have to commend the modern coach. It's a lot different than when I was in school in the 90s, 70s, and 80s. It was kind of then, it was like, I don't know how many of those coaches would have been able to coach now and adapt, because it was kind of like one size fits all. We're all doing this. You don't like it? Shut the hell up. Get out of here. You're done. Get off my team. I feel like, in a sense, it might have been easier then, because you kind of just treated everyone the exact same. Whereas now, coaches really have to get in depth with each athlete, and learn them what makes them or what triggers them. So I really commend all these coaches now, because it's a lot different than when I was in school. It was like, you're doing this, and if you don't like it, bye.
Yeah, it's much more complex. More is required of the coaches. And parents are more involved in children's lives than they were when I was growing up. And so it is very, very complex. And I used to teach workshops for the Positive Coaching Alliance. And I would go teach these workshops, and it was how to help the coaches work with kids. But inevitably, there would be a number of coaches that would pull me aside and say, we need support in how to work with the parents.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where it becomes risky, because then you're getting into things around job insecurity.
So, yeah. I want you to throw a pitch out there. Starting off at the college level, what could be the benefit of colleges having a mental performance coach in all of their facilities? Now, I'd imagine some of your major schools probably have somebody there like yourself that can work with the athletes to get through some hurdles, like, probably like your Michigans, your LSUs, your Bamas, which are run like businesses. But to all the other colleges out there, Division I programs that have money that maybe don't, what would be the benefit, of having somebody like yourself to work with the athletes there? Because, collegiate athletes have just as many questions. And I feel like a lot of the times when I was there, we'll turn to a lot of our athletic academic advisor and go talk to them, or some of our coaches and things like that. And so what would be the value, give your pitch so that we can get your profession in more places and everything like that?
Well, kids going off to college have a lot of stresses on top of having a new coach and being freshmen all over again.
Yeah.
But they have social stress, academic stress, being away from home stress, dating stress. There's all kinds of, right? So there's all kinds of stressors that it's a big learning curve to learn how to navigate. And if you already struggle with anxiety or regulating your feelings, it could be really challenging to know what to do. And so a lot of universities now do have clinical social workers and sports psychologists working there. I met with, this is a kind of this adds to that. We just, a bunch of us there was a reunion at UVA for NCAA cross country nationals. So they invited runners from all the decades, all the cross-country runners, to come and participate in various events. And about a month or so ahead of time, I wrote to the athletic director and I said, listen, some bad stuff went down when I was at the University of Virginia and for myself and, for my team. And I'm not looking for an apology or remuneration, but I would like to talk to somebody. And they said, sure. So myself and another teammate met with the deputy AD for track and field and cross country for an hour and a half and said, there were girls with eating disorders. There was sexual harassment. There was all kinds of stuff. And he talked about how complex systems are in place to support athletes and introduced us to two of the members on their mental health staff. And I work with a girl who competes at UVA, and she got injured her first semester, and she's like the happiest injured person I've ever met. I was like, oh, this is so not like my college experience. She still felt loved by the team, included by the team, cared for, checked in with, hopeful. I just hadn't seen anything like that before.
That's great.
And that's the way it should be because, and we talk about this too, cross-country teams feel like families. And I feel like it's easier there than on the track. I feel like on the track, it's much more split, but the XC teams definitely feel like families. And it's funny you mentioned relationships because I can remember all the way back, my freshman football coach, I will never forget him, Coach Copeland, flat out, first practice, and when all of us, hey, which one of you has girlfriends? Raised their hand and said, enough of that. Worst thing for an athlete is having a girlfriend. You get too distracted. On my football team, all y'all are single. And I just remember I kept that with me. And honestly, as I got older as an athlete, I was like, not wrong. Whether it was a guy or a girl, the relationship is fine. The breakup is what makes it insufferable. So, it's funny that you mentioned that. Now, before we go, I do want to ask, how often do you deal with that? How often do you deal with a bad breakup between teammates, right? Because that's usually the worst. And it happens more in college where it just totally sinks their psyche and they need something to build them back up. Do you find that a lot?
Not so much yet. One of the things I do teach athletes to get clear on is their yeses and their nos. Because if they ever are in a compromised situation, they know very clearly ahead of time whether they're going to say yes or no. And so one of the things, like you had mentioned before, like how does a coach talk to an athlete who kind of gave up in a race? I say, when we aren't clear on our yeses and our nos, it's really easy to give our power away, right? So I worked with this one athlete. I've worked with a lot of New Jersey athletes, by the way. She's one of them, Myler, and that was happening to her. Of that situation of kind of giving away her power. And then when she got into college and started dating, she relied on that, like getting clear on her yeses and nos to understand what boundaries she wanted to set in her dating life.
And that's absolutely valuable, for women, for men, everyone, just for people to understand basically its limitations, right? Knowing your limitations in every situation. So, Meg, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. It's nice to be among the glitterati who have already been on your show and to meet you guys.
Yes. Yeah. Dave, do you have anything to say before we jump out of here?
No, I just think it's absolutely fantastic that that yourself and other people like you out there who really want to do what's best by these athletes. It's a whole different world now from when, 20, 30 years ago. And we need to stay on top of all aspects of the sport. And mental health is probably one that doesn't get talked about enough. So we're just glad that you came on, that we're able to kind of bring all this into the forefront and tell everyone it's okay. There's no shame at all. Go talk to someone and get yourself right, because if you're not right, then you're not going to put out the best version of yourself.
Yeah, in my adult life, doing this is as rewarding as running in my young life. So
definitely. And I want to throw an addendum that Dave said, don't go talk to someone, go talk to Meg. Not just someone, go talk to Meg. So once again, she's Meg Waldron. She is a mental performance coach. She works with high school and collegiate athletes, primarily distance runners, but you heard she's worked with other athletes as well. If you're also a coach, if you're also a parent and you have an athlete, reach out to her as well. You can find her at megwaldron.com. That's MEGWALDRON.com. Go find her on Twitter, Meg Waldron MS, Instagram, and, reach out to her. She's very accessible. She's very passionate, and she's kind of awesome. If you heard this, she's awesome. So everyone, we appreciate everyone for listening. You like what you heard from us. Like, share, follow, subscribe, rate us 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Go find us on the socials at Talking in Ovals. We will be back again next week with another fantastic show. Everybody, so long.